make sure everything stayed focused and really simple, and just made sure it escalated properly and felt about right. I think it was much more trying to to get all the same kind of feels with different elements, rather than trying to change too much, because it was really great in Ratchet and Clank 2.
Mm-hmm.
Also, really expensive, right? In terms of resources, it takes to like. This took a lot of your time.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, getting all the different waves, the number of enemies, all the bosses, getting all these kinds of transitions working right, in between waves and that kind of stuff, as well as like the progression, the unlocking, and shockingly, all the UI involved was just
Well, I
massive.
imagine,
Um,
especially the way you work, I imagine you didn't pilfer too much from the old code base. You're the type of person who likes to do things your own way, right? So you probably didn't
yep.
inherit too much from, you know, what was there before.
Yeah, I think pretty much every single element of this was completely rewritten from scratch, just trying to make it feel just like the old one. I guess the hard part is just trying to take over a huge amount of someone's code is always a huge challenge, especially if you're brand new to the industry and brand new to the code base.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I was more experienced, if I were to do it nowadays, I probably would have taken a lot more. But yeah, back then the attitude was just rewrite everything to be exactly how you want it.
Right, but at the same time, exactly how you want it, but trying to mimic the old code as much as possible. It's a
Exactly. Yeah,
weird
trying to get
it's a
the
weird
right
position
feel.
to be in, because I know there's like there's a lot of minor things, like just getting the guys running out of those pods. There a lot of things come onto that, like getting them, like they get caught up running at the edges and things like that.
Yep.
And Max
Yeah.
spent a lot of time in Ratchet and Clank 2 fixing those problems in his system, and then you're starting to run into those problems again and having to fix them over again in your new way. It's it can be seen as sort of a lost bit of time where you're like, we've
And
already solved this
Yeah.
once and now you're doing it again. You're
and
running
Max
into the
had
exact same problems.
Max had moved on to Resistance too at that point, so
Yep.
he wasn't really around and able to help fix those things.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't around to like literally fix the code, but he was definitely around to like give advice and say like, when I ran into a problem, I could always drop by and be like, "How did you solve this last time?" And he would say, "Oh, look at this code over here. This is the solution." And I'd say, "Oh, okay, like at a high level, like one of the biggest problems with the arenas is guys somehow like vanishing, and the arena level just being in an empty arena, it not registering that you're done because someone like wandered out the arena, or when you hit one of them, it flew out, or so on and so forth." So yeah, he sort of helped me like jump to the right conclusions on how to solve those kinds of problems.
How did you solve that kind of problem?
We just put like a big pill around the arena, and anything outside the pill just died. So if anything ever escaped, we just killed it.
Elegant.
Yep.
Did I just lose?
So you did the boss fights in here as well, right?
Yeah, I did the boss fights. I think Jared did most of these platforming sections though. The ones that are like a platforming section and like a boss fight and that kind of stuff. I think Jared did most of the platform stuff.
So these were, I guess, your first boss fights that you ever did.
The first boss fight was in another level, but yeah, this was sort of like the second and third boss fights I'd ever done.
How did
Which
you-
one? Which one was your first one?
The spaceship thing, Mabob. I don't know what it was called.
Okay, fair enough.
So
But yeah, we haven't gotten to that yet.
so how did you approach sort of that sort of? I mean, boss fights are difficult. Like boss fights are really hard
Yeah.
to do. Like how did you go in and just be like? Because I mean, first year making games, and now you have to do boss fights. Like that's
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. I mean, even especially for the other boss fight I did, it was the third Moby I implemented. So it was kind of crazy. But on this one, I was working with Colin, and he sort of had, like pretty detailed design docs on what he had in mind. And, a lot of stuff doesn't transfer very well from paper into implementation, but just like sort of sitting with him, going through all the details, just figuring out what does and doesn't work. But yeah, it's just sort of making sure that everything feels right and escalates right, and then that, as you guys always mention, like that you feel powerful. Like there's so many of these attacks on these boss fights that are all about making something look really threatening, but not being threatening at all.
Mhm.
Like the mortar attacks, right?
Exactly. The mortar attack is like the perfect example of that, where you have like a billion reticles, but because you're warned about them and have so much time to get out of the way, like you're not ever really in danger. You just have to not stand still. But you really do feel like you're being a badass and avoiding, 100 missiles or so on, or whatever it is.
Sweet.
So, I guess did you? We use that missile reticle thing a lot of places. Did you do it first on this boss? And was I stealing
No,
that kind of
no,
stuff from you, or?
Carl Glaive came up with that originally for, I can't remember what it was
I
for.
think we had
I
an
think it
enemy
might have
that did
been,
it, but I don't recall. Like
yeah.
it's
Oh, I remember. It was like the giant mech guy.
yeah. That was got the he was like
Oh,
built in two parts and
Yep.
yeah
the
yeah
floating
yeah.
robot torso or a different guy?
Oh no, this
No,
guy
no, no, a
was
different
walking
one.
around and yeah, he had missile cannons and he's
Yeah.
in the Doctor Nefarious fight as well. Yeah, he came first.
Yeah, that's where we sort of got that attack from.
Why don't you do the championship out, Mike? Let's look at Moo's hard work at boss fights.
Okay. I did the championship bout and I think I lost it, so I didn't want to do it again.
Have we unlocked the second boss?
I think if we do a couple more of these, we can get to the second. I don't even recall the second boss. What's the second boss here?
The scorpion guy, scorpion tank thing. I think you have to play other levels to unlock that.
Oh,
Like you have to come back to Annihilation Nation later in the storyline.
Yeah, because we only had one arena in this one, so we unlocked a bunch of challenges later.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this challenge is just more of the same rather than, like big crazy new
I think
enemies.
I think the actually so you worked on Dax, right? I think
Yep.
the next Annihilation Nation comes right after Dax.
I think that's right, yeah.
Because you come here to get the prize from Courtney Gears, so that you can ask her why she's sponsoring Dr. Nefarious or whatever.
Got it.
wow! Way to spoil the story, though, Mike.
I
That was
know.
great of you.
Yeah. You guys have to get me back when you guys go to that part because it has the only texture that I drew that stayed in the game.
For the
Why would-
boss fight, you mean?
Yeah.
I remember. This is something I might be misremembering, but that helix effect on the robots, like, wasn't there a lot of pushback to not have that helix effect? Like, I remember there being some sort of fight over that.
Yeah, so the problem was originally that I didn't know how to do any effects, and I kept trying all kinds of different stuff, and the only thing that I could do that looked really cool was helixes, and so I started putting them everywhere. And I think that was sort of the problem, is that, like, everything sort of... I mean, this wasn't a proper helix, it's just a texture that kind of looks like
Right.
it. But when I was doing, like, the VR training, swing shot stuff, like, everything was a helix with, subtractive blending, because it's just, like, the only tools I kind of knew. Like, for example, when the crates pop up, they have a helix around them to, like, squish them in and pop them. Like, basically everything I did at the beginning had a helix in it.
And I guess people pulled you aside and said, "Hey, maybe you need to cut back on the amount
Yeah,
of
maybe
helixes."
less helixes.
Well, it's kind of
They're-
like
they're-
people pulled you aside and told you to stop doing
Pink effects.
pink effects. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
But then
shit,
we had
Tony.
But then we had the Courtney Gears level, which was all pink, and that's okay. apparently.
Yeah, but it was mainly because it was me, is why it was okay.
Oh, I see.
When it's you, you can't do it. But oh man. So I just got an Inferno crate in a timed level or in a timed round, and the Inferno crate almost screwed me out of the beating that round.
Oh.
That's not nice.
Yeah.
Why would you do something like that?
I didn't do something like that. Somebody put that in there, put it in the spawner.
Whoever did this level, it's probably their fault.
Probably a designer. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, probably a design. So I think the one nice thing about arenas versus the battlefields was instead of having to like set up a bunch of blocks, like all of it was just, I think, a big like table in code. And basically all they'd have to say is be like, oh, this is, my new Excel spreadsheet, please put this in, rather than spending weeks and weeks of trying to like rig up enemies and so on and so forth.
That's it. Progress. That's almost like scripting.
Not exactly, but yeah.
So what was the hardest part about working on the Annihilation Nation stuff?
I'm trying to think about it. I think it was just like, I think I did spend a lot of time on it, but there's still a lot of enemies and just making sure like everything flows correctly. I think a lot of the bugs were guys getting stuck in the crates, or in the spawners, Ratchet running in the spawners, all these weird combinatorial things of like when you have these hazards and this thing with these enemies, their AI starts behaving weird. Like lots and lots of like enemies walking on top of the hazards looking really weird, and all that kind of stuff. Like there's just so many different components that it was just sort of hard to manage and get all the bugs right with the infinite combinations that we could configure.
How big an issue was frame rate for you guys? Did that come up too
I don't
often,
think-
or did you guys actually do all right with that?
The crowd was a frame rate problem.
Yeah,
So
the crowd was a
guys up
frame rate
in the
problem, and I
gallery.
think they just got rid of it for that reason.
Well, the crowd's still there. It's just like way lower poly, way fewer bones than it was.
Yeah, they're all animated billboard guys. But yeah, the frame rate wasn't a much bigger problem here than it was everywhere else. I mean, at the end when we sort of did the frame rate pass on everything, I think the arenas were as big an issue as the other levels we had to deal with.
God, I'm not even gonna get to the boss. I have no ammunition.
I guess maybe you got to come back when you got more weapons,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. I don't know what else you got. What else you got to say about this move?
Trying to think, it's weird trying to remember this kind of stuff, but I think for the most part it wasn't too bad. It was just sort of getting the right feel of stuff. Trying to think of the worst bugs, and most of them were like things escaping levels. I mean, I ran into all the same bugs that Max ran into. So I ran into like the golden shower. I ran into enemies escaping.
Wait, the golden shower.
Right.
What's the golden shower?
The golden shower. So the one thing we do in the arenas is that we just recycle enemy. There's no like dynamic memory allocation, or there's not much dynamic memory allocation in Ratchet and Clank the way we programmed it back then. So we just have like these giant pools of enemies scattered or set outside the level that we sort of warp in.
Oh, really? I wasn't aware of that. So when they die, they don't die. They just teleport away.
Exactly, they just teleport away. And
Oh,
when you
interesting.
start recycling things, a lot of the time people get stuck in the dead state, and they'll just be dead every frame and spawning bolts every frame. And so they'll be just outside of the arena, like 20 or 30 guys spawning, 20 bolts every time. And as time goes on, it just sort of overwhelms you until the screen is like completely filled with bolts and crashes.
And we called it the golden shower because the bolts were
Yep.
gold. And because we're disgusting.
Yeah, it looks
What
like
do you
you're
think?
not
Should I get the Hydra?
It looks like you're not going to get that challenge done.
Yeah,
You can-
I'm
I mean,
gonna.
you
I
get
think
whatever
you need
you
more
wanna
ammo
get.
for that.
All right. I'll just do this platforming one, and we can keep talking.
Yeah, I mean the other nice things about being new to all this stuff and like implementing like things like the cameras that follow you around. There's just like so many little touches that are just a load of fun to work on, even though they're not really core to the game. Like I remember the amount of time that Jared and I spent on that spinner that spinner thing of just making it spin really quick but end up on the result that we want. Because obviously we're supposed to make you feel like it's random, but it's not.
Wait, what?
It's configured in the levels. Oh, what?
Don't look
Not
behind the
random.
curtain. Pay no attention.
Sorry. Yeah, so that's just all configured, and we just want to make it look random. So we sort of like choose what the result is, choose a random amount of time to spin, go back from that, and just calculate the rest out, and that kind of stuff. But it's just like all these little touches have such a huge impact on the game in the end. But like when you sort of go into these meetings and discuss like, oh, I'm going to spend 2 days on cameras that follow you poorly, it just sounds kind of mental.
So did you do any? You did some stuff on these little obstacles course challenges, right?
Yeah, I mean, by the end of it, like everyone was doing little stuff on everything. But yeah, Jared and I sort of shared
Oh
this
shit! The
level. And he was
ninjas are here.
focused.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh yeah, no, and we just sort of shared whatever, and I think, yeah, I had a decent amount of like bug fixing and like small implementation tasks on this, but for the most part, Jared sort of drove it forward.
I mean, these are interesting in themselves because they're basically built out of building blocks, which
Yep.
is, I mean, what it is. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, making sure that they all fit together and do things properly.
Exactly, and especially we sort of have this idea of update distance, and so things only update in like a certain distance around Ratchet, and everything else is just sort of not updated to save on frame rate. But all these puzzles are like these synchronized patterns that you need to get right, and so it's like you kind of need it to update in the whole level, but we don't want to run the whole level at the same time. So Jared had to have like all these interesting synchronism mechanisms where, one thing that was the head of the pattern would drive the whole thing forward, so that everything would stay in sync.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're done for now with Annihilation Nation.
Oh, cool.
And,
All right.
we're off to Tyrannosis. So I guess that's it.
All right, so for Ratchet and Clank, Up Your Arsenal developer commentary, I am Tony Garcia.
And I'm Mike Stout. And today we've got our guest.
Muyu.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time.